Thank you for joining us for our CST Lunch and Learn. Today, our topic is going to be maintenance distribution. And in just a few minutes, I will turn it over to Mark, and he will show us what they've got going over in maintenance. So, before I hand it over to him, I was going to go over a couple of things real quickly. We do this with our APCM presentations. Just a reminder that ASHTOWare Project Construction and Materials is our replacement for Site Manager. Site Manager is no longer supported by ASHTOWare, so we need to replace it. The topic for our lunch and learns for the last several months has been APCM, different aspects of it. Today, we're doing maintenance distribution. This is a list of the ones that we have done previously. On the right side of the screen there is a QR code. If you scan it, it will take you to our website where we are storing all of these meetings and the recordings we had of these lunch and learns. You can access those there if you want a refresher or you missed one of the ones that we gave previously. And just a friendly reminder, we are now in phase 2 of the rollout. Abilene, Fort Worth, Lufkin, Waco, and Yoakum were rolled out in January. Brownwood, Lubbock, Laredo, San Antonio, San Angelo. Y'all started APCM this month. You can see who's coming up next: Amarillo, Atlanta, Beaumont, Bryan, Paris. It's coming your way. We will continue to focus on APCM in our lunch and learns as we continue with the rollout. Hopefully, by the time we start doing projects or getting projects off the ground in the field, we've got most of the kinks ironed out. On that front, I am going to pass it over to Mark and let him start showing him let him start showing y'all what they've got going on in maintenance. Mark, I can see your screen. It is all you.
Very good. Thank you, Justin. Good afternoon, everyone. Figured I could start the conversation this afternoon just as I've been playing around on the test server in APCM. I always, when I'm learning a new software, kind of like to understand how the developers designed it. I believe Justin did a little demo on this last month, so you may have already seen some of this. So just want to spend a few minutes kind of talking about some tips that I have for using APCM. And it starts when you log into the software. There's these 3 buttons at the top, which I find all of them to be extremely helpful. There is a home button, which is fairly self-explanatory. If you ever find yourself in a screen and you don't know how you got there and you're trying to get out of it, you can always hit that home button and it brings you back to a global screen where there are many options of things you can do. If you hit the arrow, you can actually change your role. This previous button is just like a browser back button. So you can either hit the previous button and it goes to the screen you were just on, or if you hit the down arrow, it will give you several pages that you had been on previously. I also find that to be extremely helpful. And then lastly, this button here, My Pages, it's basically like bookmarks. So what you can do here is you can hit the down arrow and it will show all pages that you have bookmarked. You can hit the My Pages button to go and kind of manage your bookmarks. You can delete bookmarks. You can, when you're on a screen, you can bookmark that screen. I like to highlight that because for most folks, when you're using this software, let's just say you're an inspector and you have 4 or 5 contracts you work on, you really don't need to log into this software and continue to search for your project over and over every time you log in. What you can do is you can create a bookmark, and you can do it through a number of different screens. But what I've written here is what I would recommend is you either do it through the contract progress screen, the DWR screen, or the contract administration screen. So the contract progress screen gives you links to do all the kinds of things that we're going to do on a typical basis: creating DWRs, diary entries, running estimates, change orders. All those options are available from contract progress. The DWR screen for an inspector, if you just want to go right there, because typically what you're doing in APCM is creating DWRs, that's probably a good option. Contract administration may be good for somebody like a record keeper or potentially a district contract specialist. You can do things like activating the contract. You can add checklist events, checklist dates, key dates, and things like that. And you can create milestones. All that can be done from the contract administration screen. This is the global screen or the home screen when you log in. I highlight these two because I do think from my experience playing around with this, at least on the test server, these are the two heaviest hitters. And if there were a heavier of the two, I would say it's contract progress. Again, basically everything you need to do on a regular basis once you've activated the contract and kind of set it up, you can do that through contract progress. So you have several other options here. Not saying to not click those, you certainly can, but I do want to highlight the importance of that screen. APCM kind of works in a hierarchical structure is what I gather as I click through this. So this is the home screen again. You have these options. They're going to be different depending on what role you are logged in at. But I would call this like a global screen. You can see here next to construction, there's no CSJ showing. You're not within a project. You can't create DWRs from here because it doesn't know what project you want to create them on. So if you click the contract progress link, it's going to take you to a screen like this, contract progress overview. You can start searching for your contract, and as you type the numbers without even hitting the search button, it should pop up if the contract has been loaded to APCM. And then from there, these headers are always important because now when I look in the header, it doesn't just say general contract progress. It has a contract, a description of the contract. Now I know I'm not at a global level. I am now down at a contract level. I have various options of things I can do from the contract progress screen, DWRs, your diaries, your change orders, estimates. That's why I think contract progress is probably the biggest moneymaker in APCM. You're going to be going into that very frequently if you manage these contracts on a regular basis. If you hit the DWR button, it will then take you over, and sometimes these DWRs show up. This is some testing I was doing. Sometimes they don't necessarily show up previously created DWRs, but you should have a little option to say, show me the recent 10 most DWRs, and it will show those. And then you have hot links where if I just click on the date, it then takes me to that actual DWR. And I show this because now I'm going down at a further level beneath that. I'm not at the contract level. I'm all the way down to the DWR level. So I have all the options of things I can do within that individual DWR, just to kind of demonstrate how the hierarchical structure works. And I know from the headers, because it has this information here, I am not at the contract level. I am certainly not at a global level. I'm all the way down at the DWR level. Just kind of looking at the links in APCM, as I click around and work through this, you've got these horizontal headers, and then you've got these left side vertical options. The horizontal headers at the top of the screen, below these three very important buttons. On the left side, typically you'll see buttons that say like overview. Sometimes there's a couple of different options. My general recommendation there is you probably want to avoid that. If you're within an individual contract, if you hit a button that says overview or an option for overview, it's going to take you all the way back to a global screen. And unless you're trying to get to another contract and search for it, you probably don't want to click there. All these other options here are things that you can do within this particular contract. So the way the developers have designed this is these are not things that are part of contract administration, but these are options that they think once you're done doing whatever you need to do on contract administration, logically you may want to do one of these. Maybe you need to go to contract progress. You can do payments, but they are all things that will keep you within the same project. And probably the biggest tip I would give here is that anytime you're in a contract administration screen for a project, you're always going to have an option to go over to contract progress. If you're within contract progress, you're always going to have a link to go back to contract administration. And then the vertical headers on the left side. So these are things that directly pertain to the title of this page, which in this case is contract administration summary. So these things, setting up contract times and milestones, activating the contract, setting contract authority who has the ability to approve estimates. Those are all things that fall within contract administration, but just pointer for you if you're ever within a screen like this and you say, hey, I'm trying to create a DWR, but I don't see an option for that. Well, that's because that's under contract progress, and you can simply click over here and that will take you over to that screen within the same project, and you can start creating DWRs. Okay, so I just kind of want to cover high level some tips that I had there. Give me a second. There we go. So this is the home page. Refresh this. And bear with me a little bit. The test server does run a little bit slow. So we will give it a minute and hopefully this will load back up. Okay. And I'm just going to take myself, and this is a good example. Let's just say I found myself in this screen for all daily work reports and I'm looking at this and I'm saying, I don't care about any of this. I need to get back where I start. You can always go back to your home page. And we'll wait for that to load. If I click this arrow, this is going to show all of my roles. This here at the bottom, vending RQ, that is going to take me into APVM, which some of you use this already, vendor management, where you can look up contractor pre-qualification information. And that's because it's all part of the same suite of software products developed by APCM. APCM is APCM Project Construction Materials. APVM is APCM Project Vendor Management. All these other things here are different roles that I have. To create a DWR, I'm going to use the project manager role. If I wanted to create an evaluation, I may need the area engineer role if I had that, which I do for the sake of testing. But if you're looking at your options here within APCM and you're saying, hey, I don't see all of this, that is not due to the software, it's due to the role that you're logged in under. Okay, so now again, as I said earlier, you've got all your previous screens here if you need to bounce back and forth. And if you want to create bookmarks, you can do that there. I'm going to go into contract progress. As I mentioned, to me, that's probably the most important screen. It actually brought up the previous search that I had, and this is the contract we're going to go into. But I'm just going to clear this for the sake of, no, it didn't clear that out. But if I search for another CSJ or something like that, see how that clears out? And it actually says, okay, well, there's one over here. As I type in, it is looking and searching on a CSJ that I want. So in this case, I'm going to go to 642834. It kind of knows this because I've been testing around on the same project. And I'm going to click that link, not terribly complicated. And so this loads up our contract progress summary. If you want to go and create milestones, you click on contract administration. If you click somewhere that you didn't mean to click, just simply hit the previous button, no worries. Since I probably will be doing a lot of work within this screen downstream, I'm going to go to my pages and I'm going to say, remember this page. It's going to create a bookmark there for me. And hopefully next time I log in, I don't need to search for it. I can simply go to my pages and click on that link and it will take me right here. Really nice feature. So I'm going to go to daily work reports. The topic of today's discussion is about how we can create DWRs and do distribution. You can see it's showing a record of ones that I created previously. I can click on those links and look into those details. But for what we're doing today, I'm going to try to create a new one by hitting the add button. And I first need to pick a DWR date. So I'm going to try one and say this was February 12th. It has my name here. You can put in weather, just say it was clear. I'm not going to fill out rainfall if it was clear, but let's just say it was 67 was a low, high was 77. You can fill in that information. And then at the bottom, you can put in remarks for the DWR. Similar to what we do in Site Manager, this shouldn't be anything you're too unfamiliar with. I think most of you have done this before. So I'm just going to pick general. I'm going to say contractor repaired bridge beam worked from 8 to 5. And of course, that's very simplistic. I realize you guys add a lot of other details, and that's fine. But for the sake of this demo, I'm just going to make it simple. You will often see these warnings that pop up in APCM saying you have unsaved changes. I know I need to save that. I'm going to click that button. And it's going to reload this. So I've got my first screen done. You can see this information. It's saved it. It's got all that there. And I'm just going to work my way through from top to bottom here. So I'm going to go to contractors on site. I'm going to click this button. And because I'm logged in as a project manager, it should give me this option. It says, here's the prime contractor. If you had subcontractors, you could pick one of those, I believe. But I'm just going to pick the prime contractor, and I'm going to add this to my DWR. You can add in start and end times. We don't typically do that as much on maintenance contracts. Construction, I think this is more critical to be doing that. We always say in your DWR general comments to make sure you have some kind of notes. And again, I'm getting that warning message, so I'm going to go ahead and save it now that it knows what contractor did the work on this day. And you can see this information here below. And again, this kind of takes you down at the lowest level of the hierarchy. I'm not at the contract level. I am at the DWR level. So I'll go to contract equipment next. And some of this is just kind of getting familiar with how to click through these screens. In this case, I don't have a button. I'm just going to click this blue arrow button on the right side, and I can select equipment. Let's just say they were using a backhoe, so I'm going to select that. These are just kind of generic pieces of equipment. Hopefully you have everything you need, but if you don't, one thing you can do is just kind of pick this other. And I'm going to add this to the DWR. How many backhoes were at the site? Maybe I'll say, well, there were 2 of them. One of them was being used. It was used for 8 hours. Maybe I could say 1 backhoe was idle or something like that, because I only used 1 piece of equipment, but there were 2 there. Here, let's just say this was a piece of equipment. I couldn't find it in the list. It was being used. It was used for 4 hours. And I could say something like this was an asphalt distributor. Just kind of show you how you can add equipment to your DWR. Nothing too crazy here. And I'm getting that warning message, so I'm going to go ahead and save this. And we are quickly making our way through the DWR. So I've got my contractor identified. I've done my weather. I've got my equipment. I'm going to next go to personnel. And I believe I click on this arrow on the right side. And there are options here of things you can do. Often you will see that within APCM. There's different arrows and things that you can expand. Sometimes it's just kind of a matter of clicking around with things and you'll get more familiar with it. But in this case, there's an option for select generic personnel. I'm going to select that. Try that again. I'm not sure what's happening there. If this screen does work, usually what pops up is you can pick skilled and unskilled labor. Try it one more time. There we go. Okay. So I'm just going to say, I'm going to check skilled and unskilled. You can pick supervisor. I think this is pretty similar to options you had in site manager. I'm going to add that to the DWR. How many skilled personnel? I'll just say 1 was there that worked 8 hours, maybe 3 unskilled. And that's a total of 24 hours that were worked. And of course, I get my warning message that pops up. I need to go ahead and save my DWR. And then lastly, and this is the tricky part, if you have quantifiable work to the contract, you go to the posting screen. And there's already been a previous video that kind of walks you through this, but today, for the sake of maintenance, we're gonna try this to do maintenance distribution. And I'm just gonna pick a couple of items. I'll pick an item here and I'll just say barricades. It really doesn't matter. If you click around these screens, you'll get familiar. Sometimes if you have hundreds of items, you can click the 2 selected and it just brings up the ones you want. You can search for the items you want. There's a lot of options here that you might want to play around with, particularly on construction contracts that have lots and lots of items. But for the sake of this, I'm going to go ahead and save this. and see what happens here. All right, so it brings up the two items. I'm going to click on this left side arrow, and I'm going to expand this. And it brings up this option for new DWR item posting. So this is a concrete beam repair. It's measured by the each. I'm just going to say that we repaired one beam. You have all this other information in the DWR with offsets. We don't typically do that in maintenance because we track stuff to the reference marker in MMS. You do have to put in a location. This is actually a contract in the San Angelo district. So I'm just going to say US 87. But you would follow what you typically put for the location. If this is a measured item, like square feet or something, you could check that box. And then the comments here are like your pay bubble that we have in Site Manager. And anytime you have to quantify like square feet and things like that, we're supposed to be doing that on maintenance projects, whether it's to the quantity on the item, which in this case, it's by the each, so there's not really a measurement involved. But let's just say you were doing like a seal coat, and you had 12-foot lane times 1,000 feet, right? And you could say this equals 12,000 feet, or square feet, I guess that would be, for MMS. And you could put in a comment like that, and you could save that as part of your pay bubble. And that helps us to know how you came up with the quantity you're charging to MMS, or if this was a calculated quantity to the actual item, you would want to put those in your pay bubble here. I'm just going to cancel that out, and I'm going to go ahead and hit save. And that should be saving the quantity to that item. I'm going to open this arrow again. So we're halfway there. We've quantified the work for the contract. It's giving me an error message here saying, hey, you've exceeded your quantity in your contract. I wouldn't worry about this too much. This happens all the time on maintenance contracts. It's just an FYI saying that the quantity that we are now approving is more than what's currently in the contract. But that does not mean that you cannot continue. So I'm going to, not at the high level here, which is about the item, but actually about this item posting for the quantity that I pay. I'm going to click on this arrow, and you see a series of actions, and this is where we do maintenance distribution. So I'm going to click posting distribution. And I will say, as I've been testing with this takes a little while to generate. All right, I do see some questions coming on the chat, and folks are responding. And I think we will get to some of that later too. But let's get through the maintenance distribution for now, and then we can probably get into some discussion on some of those questions in the chat. And I do apologize, as I was testing, this does go slow to load the distribution. Hopefully this is a little faster on the production server. Okay, so it's still loading a little bit. And the first question that it's asking is, what PCBU are you charging to? No, 60178 is what we use for MMS work that's done on the road or the roadside. 176 is construction. Other PCBUs would be things like a state use contract, and we're going to simulate that here in just a few minutes. But for now, I want to go to PCBU 60178. I'm getting my warning message popping up, so I'm going to save this. And what it's actually doing, because I picked 60178, is it is now loading options of things that I need to fill in for my chart fields or for doing maintenance distribution. Because I picked this option here, it knows that I'm charging this to the roadway, and it will bring up those specific options to fill out. So we'll give it just a minute to load this. And while it's doing that, I will say one of the changes you're going to see with this now in the current scenario in Site Manager, we do this on all of our pay items when we charge to the roadway. Now, when you have work that's not done on the roadside, you're going to have to do distribution on any time you pay an item and quantify it. And I'm going to get to an example of that downstream when we get through this. Let me just kind of walk you through how you fill out these screens. You're going to click in here, you start and you work from left to right. And if you don't know the account number, you can simply hit the enter key and it brings up the options that you have. For stuff on the roadside, it's pretty much always 7270, as I understand it. It's going to ask you for the asset type. Normally, this is only a couple of these. You got highways, bridges, picnic areas, and rest areas. Well, this is a bridge repair contract. It's only showing me bridge because this is the way the contract was configured in MMS. That's when your contract specialist set that up in MMS. It interfaces over here to APCM. APCM says this is not a contract where you're working on the highway. You're only working on bridges. So I'll pick a bridge. And you'll start to see more and more of this information pops up as I fill that in. These are function codes that are available under planning activity S01 for bridge superstructure. I'm doing a concrete beam repair, so I'm just going to pick concrete superstructure. Kind of logically makes sense. If you're wondering why you're not seeing other MMS function codes, it's because this is the way the contract was configured in MMS. The contract specialist said only planning activity S01 is applicable on this contract. So if you're seeing a function code that you think this should be and it's not on this list, you need to get with your contract specialist to go back into MMS and add those applicable planning activities. All right, so then things again gradually fill in as I fill this out. What's my work quantity? This is by square foot. And I'm just going to say maybe there were 10 square feet. In fact, in the DWR, I could have done a little calculation, explained how I came up with that. But for the sake of the demo, I'll just say this was 10 square feet, which corresponds to one beam that was repaired. So the inspector would just have to know that that was 10 square feet. And then you've got a maintenance section accounting. We're trying to derive the department ID. I'll just say this was in Tom Green County, maintenance section 0706. And it continues to populate information. So then it says, what highway is it? So I'm gonna hit the enter key again. And these options again are only showing up that correspond to highways in the San Angelo Maintenance Office within Tom Green County. So I'm gonna say US 87. It's gonna give me then options for reference markers. If you're doing bridges, this is another tip for APCM. Rather than the NBI number, you're also going to have to know what mile marker were they at. And I'm just going to pick one at random. So you can see how the beginning and ending reference markers are the exact same location because this is a bridge. So I'm going to put that in here. And then when I go to asset ID and I hit enter, it should only show one bridge because there's only going to be one bridge at that specific point along the highway. So this is your NBI number. I'm going to select an NBI number. If you have a task number, so this is San Angelo District, you can type 07, it starts bringing up options. If I want to see disaster task numbers, just for the sake of the demo, I'll just pick one of these. It shows up, and there is my task number. So I've now filled out all of my distribution for this item, and I'm going to hit save again. All right, so it went ahead and saved that. And I've now completed maintenance distribution for an item that was done on the roadway. I'm going to go back to DWR item posting. Also, if I hit previous, that should take me there. Either way works. So I'm going to go to DWR item posting. And again, I created two items. I've now done distribution for the first item. So we need to work on this second item. I'm going to say here, now this is barricades, but just for the sake of this discussion, I want you to think for a second like this was a janitorial contract where we were doing work at a TxDOT area office or a maintenance office. I'm just going to put a quantity of 1. All right, I'm going to say Tom Green maintenance office. I realize this is not a typical pay item that you would see like that, but for the sake of the demo, I hope you understand what I'm doing. I'm just kind of making the assumption that this was an item on a state use contract where we're doing janitorial work. If you need to quantify things, you can add in comments. And I'm just going to go ahead and save this. I am going to expand this again. click on this arrow here, not the top one, but the lower one. And I'm going to go back to posting distribution. If you have done state use contracts in Site Manager, you will notice that this is not how we do this today. We do this when we run an estimate. Now in APCM, we have to do this at least today down at the DWR level. So anytime you are paying out an item and you're not charging to the roadway like a janitorial contract, you're going to go ahead and do a distribution just like you do for anything on the roadway. I'm going to go back to the PCBU. You always start here. I'm not charging to 60178. They're not working on the highway. They're working at a TxDOT maintenance office. So I'm actually going to pick other PCBUs. And I'm going to save. It gives me that option. And now, instead of loading the options to fill in distribution on 60178, which is contracted routine maintenance, we're going to go down and we're going to try to charge to 60171 for overhead. And it is loading, takes a little bit of time. It's first going to ask me the PCBU. I'm going to pick 60171, I guess, for overhead. It's going to ask me what district is this. We are in San Angelo, pretty straightforward. Then what department ID. I'm going to say this is 07006. And as I type, it continues to show me only options that are available. You kind of need to know some of your chart field information before you dive into this. Typically, when we have overhead, it's always going to be 437002. And then we get into activity. I'm going to put in IND. Gives me the options. I'm going to pick that. You do have the same ability as you go through these where you can hit the enter key. But as I do this, some of these, this one only brought up, says there's 27 tied to, I guess, this activity. Sometimes there's hundreds and hundreds of them. So really in this case, when you're charging the overhead like this under other PCBs, it makes a lot better sense to kind of know what your chart fields are in advance. I'm going to hit 020. My appropriation is, let me see how many, if I just hit the enter key to kind of demonstrate this, it says there's 265 of them. That doesn't help me a whole lot. So I'm going to say, I know it's a 13045 for contracted maintenance. Task number, if you have one, you can certainly fill that in. For the sake of this, I'm just going to leave it blank. And then for the account, if I hit enter, there's only a couple options. And I'm just going to say cleaning services for janitorial work. Filled out everything. And again, this is being done at the DWR level. This is not being done when we run the estimate. So we're going to have to work with our inspectors to show them how to do some of this. Save that. And hopefully that will save the chart field information. Now, just kind of demonstrate, it should show all the stuff at the bottom. Okay, it's there, it saved it. Rather than clicking DWR item posting, I'm going to hit the previous button. We're going to see if this works. Should take me back to the DWR screen, which it did. And now I've created 2 different item postings to pay for these. I've fully done my distribution. Along the contract header up here where it says bridge beam repair, last thing I can do is I click this white arrow where it says open component actions, and I can submit for approval. Now, right now, you may wonder, why does it show the ability to approve? I think that has something to do with the roles that I have. In some cases, at least, as we get this started in APCM, you may have the ability to approve your own DWR. Please don't do that. That's not following policy, but do notify those that should be reviewing to approve it. And you can see here, now I have a status of pending approval. So this has been submitted. And logically, whoever approves this can then log into APCM. They would go down to this contract the very same way. I would go through contract progress, then you can go to DWRs. In fact, I'm just going to do that here. If I go to contract progress this way, let's just say I was logging in as the approver. It's loading the information about the contract, and I go to DWRs. And I don't know what day that was. Well, it may not be showing up just yet, but I don't recall which day I put. Maybe it was this one here on February 12th, but I'm just going to say that it was on February 12th. I can pick that DWR. It will then go down to the DWR level. And if I was the approver, I can go in here and it gives me the option. Do I want to approve it? Do I want to reject it? Do I want to send it back to draft mode? Because I think, yeah, this is the one I just did, because I think that changes need to be made. So that's basically it. Hopefully that makes sense for those of you that have done maintenance, distribution, site manager. It is a little bit of a change when you are charging to overhead. And question, Lori.